All right, we are finally live. What's up, guys? It is 7:15 a.m. and we are finally live here on YouTube and on Instagram, as everyone can see. About to crush this trading session. We are fully locked in. Got the head shaved bald. Let's see how this goes. I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Time to take our first look at the charts here. So here we've got USD CAD. Let's see. What happened to... Oh, I'm on the wrong outlook. All right, let's check it out. Gold. It's going to take a deep dive on gold, right? So we swept today's daily high, as you guys can see there. We haven't swept... I mean, we swept the previous daily high, haven't swept the previous daily low. It's starting to reject off of this level here on the 1 hour. Oh, barely missed it, I guess. Or did it actually touch in right there? No, it did touch in. I'm not opposed to trying to target previous daily low. A move like this. I feel like that's a clean setup. But I also kind of want a smaller stop loss on this. So remember, guys, our goal this week is to make, what was it, $25,000. That's going to be our goal. We're absolutely locked in. Head is shaved bald. I really like this as well. It's giving me that 1, 2, 3 pattern that I like. Bullish candle, indecisive, and then closing below that 50. I am going to be taking my first setup on gold, guys.
I fucked up badly.
Whoa.
Over the last few weeks, I've been turning $0 into $1 million. And so far...
Where the fuck did that play from? Locked in. Locked in, locked in, locked in. Guys, the full-size stream is on YouTube as well. So if you're on Instagram, it's like a little small. If you go to YouTube, you'll see the full screen. Someone said, Ollie, you already what? And my chat is like bugged out. It won't show me the full chat. You already Owen? What? Can you guys hear me? Yeah, I'm in this. I'm in this. Look, we swept the previous daily high. Came into this level here. We haven't swept previous daily low. I want to see this candle flip, sweep previous daily low. That's kind of how I like to scalp gold. Like, strategy's been doing very well for me. Made 400 today of a gold sell. Now to where your TP. Nice. Oh, my bad, bro. I didn't see your comment. No, I haven't. This is literally the first trade that I'm taking this week, so I'm not up anything technically. How come the chat box isn't like sticking to the screen here? We'll see how Powell does. Yeah, I low-key haven't sent out my market outlooks, but these are all the pairs. We'll be looking at them shortly. Let's see. USD CAD literally got ran through. God damn. USD CHF will be waiting on confirmation out of this zone over here. Let's start to refine it. Euro USD. Bro, this was such a banger sell from last week. I wish I would have held that shit. Live trading room got to hold it though. That's good for them. Straight ripper. Straight ripper. Damn, these are all moving off the zones. NZD USD cracked through the zone. No longer valid. NZD JPY. Same shit. AUD CHF still in that zone. So we'll start to refine this one. Let's take a look back at gold. Pretty much at entry. Are you currently in any challenge accounts? If not, what? Oh, nah. I don't use prop firms, bro. I feel like they're just a waste of time and a waste of money. Oh, I got the chat to pop up now. On YouTube side, at least. Come on, gold. Alright, so Powell speaks in 4 minutes. Ah, my shit's frozen. There we go. Bro, my SL, tucking it above, like, let me make sure I get this right. My SL is above last week's weekly high, and I'm targeting the previous daily low. Holy. Yeah, I'm in this position. Why am I bald? Because I wanted to lock in, bro. Full lock in. Last time I went bald, we went on this generational run, bro, honestly. And so, we just had to replicate that shit. No, it's 0 to 1 mil now. Is the title still 170K? Oh, I should probably change that. Let me fix that. My bad, chat. Powell speaks in 1 minute. Powell speaks in 1 minute. We're in just a bit of profit right here, as you guys can see. But the federal chairman, Jerome Powell, is about to speak. And when he speaks, the markets go ape shit. So there's a possibility of this trade running well beyond these marks. It might literally take 1 second of him speaking for it to go exactly where we need. Or it might take 1 second for us to lose. We're about to find out. This guy have to say. Why is he late? What's up with that? My account balance right now is 11,891 and 70 cents. People are saying he's late because he's getting fired. That's funny. Can't wait for the classic "Good afternoon," and then it just fucking tanks. I mean, he's speaking at Harvard. Like, the fuck this got to do with anything? First time in years watching Ali, never seen him fail. Fire. Maybe you'll be the good luck, bro. Did I watch the fight? Yeah. I thought it was pretty whack. I mean, I think it's dope that they both got in there and, you know, fought, but, like, bro, like, I don't know. In my opinion, bro, just like, I think it's pretty bullshit. Like, I don't know how you get unanimous decision if you got knocked down. Um, I felt like he had. I felt like he had the first. Like, I feel like KJ had the first round and the second round. And then I feel like Sai had 3 and 4, and I feel like the last round was a tie. But like usually how it is, bro, is like if you watch boxing, like if there's a tie, the champ fucking wins. And like Sai like had already won his previous fight. You know what I mean? I don't know. I just feel like it should have been a better event, like better judges, better fucking venue, better all that shit. Not like scrambling last second to figure it out and all that. Oh, here he is.
Chair Powell's path to the pinnacle of economic policy was not paved with mathematical modeling in an economics doctoral program, but rather with a deep study of institutions and laws. Raised in Washington, D.C., he attended Princeton University, where he earned a Bachelor of Arts in Politics in 1975. He then attended Georgetown University Law Center. While earning his law degree, he also served as editor-in-chief of the Georgetown Law Journal, one of the world's most influential and prestigious legal publications. He then started a career of extraordinary impact and breadth. He distinguished himself first in the private sector.
Bro, we don't need this fucking intro. Like, everybody in the world knows. Yo, Jerome Powell, some big nuts on the market. Let's see what happens, man.
While repeatedly answering the call for public service. He served with distinction as Assistant Secretary and then Undersecretary of the Treasury under President George H.W. Bush. In 2012, he returned to public service as a member of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. His nomination to serve as chair in 2018 by President Donald Trump, and then his renomination to serve as chair by President Joe Biden in 2021 stand as testaments to his bipartisanship. Chair Powell approaches economic stewardship with a philosophy grounded in empirical evidence, institutional humility, collaboration, and public service. Like the greatest Fed chairs in our history, Paul Volcker, Ben Bernanke, Chair Powell advances the interests of our nation and not his own, sometimes at great personal cost. We are immensely privileged to have him share his insights today. Please join me in warmly welcoming the Chair of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, Jerome Powell. So I'd like to start at the beginning of your career. You studied politics and then law, and then eventually pivoted from that to public service. Were you thinking about public service and economic policy making at the start, or did all of that come as a surprise later? And how did you decide to make the pivot when you were in the middle of your career?
What the fuck is that noise? Oh, my
Looking forward
Fortnite.
to this. Yeah, so I took macro and micro my freshman year, and it wasn't as interesting to me at that age than some other things, so I wound up majoring in politics, actually specializing in Africa. It's fair to say that my freshman major was acoustic guitar. My parents gave me a Martin D35 for high school graduation. They must have regretted that because that's what I was really working on mostly. But I did finally figure out what I wanted to do. And when I graduated from college, I really had no plan, but I did have one thought, and that is to have a career in the private sector, but also to do public service intermittently. And I was thinking about people like George Shultz, who was famous, had many economic jobs, and others who had done those sorts of things. And I grew up in Washington, D.C. My parents were not, my dad had fought in World War II, and he had been a U.S. attorney, but they weren't people who were terribly plugged in politically. I was very interested, though, in those years in public policy and in trying to create a life that was partly private sector and partly public sector, and amazingly enough, that's kind of what happened.
So now, jumping right to the present, we talk about the Fed as a unitary entity, but of course, the Fed is led by the Federal Open Market Committee. There are 12 voting members. You, despite being chair, only have one vote. And in normal times, there's a lot of consensus. Everyone's in agreement. Lately, there's been some disagreement. There's been votes to keep interest rates the same, but some members of the FOMC have decided instead to vote to decrease interest rates. How does the disagreement on the FOMC make your job harder as you describe the path of economic policy going forward?
You know, I don't think of it as making my job harder. I think it's, and I've found throughout my career that when you have a really difficult problem, it helps to hear from all sides. And in a way, for example, when I was a private equity investor and I was looking at supporting a transaction that I wanted to do, I really wanted to hear from the smartest people. Tell me why it's a bad deal. Tell me now before we do it. And I just think you don't really know how much you believe in something until you've had somebody really try to take it apart. So I welcome that at the FOMC and at the Fed generally. And I think it helps us make better decisions. The Fed has had a tradition of governors not dissenting, but that's really not typical of other major central banks where there's more dissenting, or I mean, they're different, depends on the central bank. And to me, what matters is a dissent thoughtful? Is it helpful? Does it help? Does it express a point of view? Can you stand behind it and say, yeah, that's very thoughtful? And that kind of a thing is not bad. And it doesn't hurt with communications. You know, I think a situation like the present situation where, you know, there's sort of downside risk to the labor market, which suggests keep rates low, but there's upside risk to inflation, which suggests maybe don't keep rates low. You've got tension between the two objectives. And I think to try to expect unanimity at a time like that, where it's really quite historically challenging, it would almost be misleading to be really confident in which way that should go. In fact, it's been said that confidence is what you feel before you really understand the problem.
Okay. Let's turn to the Fed's balance sheet. In 2008, 2009, that great financial crisis, there was a massive expansion in the Fed's balance sheet. And then again in 2020, under your leadership, there was a second vast expansion in the Fed's balance sheet to address these two economic and financial crises. The balance sheet has since come down a bit, but it still sits at over $6 trillion. So I'd like to hear your views on how efficacious this vast bond buying program has been, both in the 2008 and then again in the 2020 episode, and also hear your reaction to the critics who say that the Fed has become too big a player in the bond market. The Fed has become too influential. There's been a muddying of as according to the critics of monetary policy and fiscal policy, do they have a point or are they wrong?
So I think the place to start with that is the problem that people were struggling with from about 2008 to 2022, let's say, in central banking everywhere in the world is once you've cut interest rates to zero, do you have anything else you can do? Let's say you cut interest rates to zero and the economy is still clearly not flourishing and it wants more support. So do you just say, well, we're done, we're out of ideas here? And there were two ideas that were followed in the global financial crisis, one of which was to buy assets, longer-term assets, and what you're doing there is you're buying longer-term government-guaranteed securities, which would hold down longer-term rates, and that should stimulate the economy. Or also forward guidance, which would tend to hold down forward rates as well, or just rates generally. So we did those two things rather than do nothing. And I think in the first instance, they were both efforts were successful at restoring market function and at restoring financial stability. At the beginning of the global financial crisis and the pandemic, we had massive problems of market function. They were solved. I think the question, getting to your question, David, of the macroeconomic effects is a much less certain question. I don't think there is an accepted answer, but I would just say there's an oceanic quantity of research on this, and overall it tends to find that buying long-term assets does lower interest rates and does provide some support for economic activity. And I guess I'd be in the camp of thinking that there's something in that, but it's hard to quantify it. And I think, different people have different views on how much those effects could be. The other side of it is,
didn't notice my mic was muted. My bad, guys.
To risk all kinds of other things. So for
We'll
example,
see though.
you could buy
Time is the greatest architect of reality.
the Treasury
I'm
market
sticking to my
itself
bearish
on
bias
its
here.
own. We have not seen that here. At the very beginning, there was the thought that it would be inflationary.
And we'll see how it
We've not
goes.
seen that.
It's
Or that it would
moving
be
very
long-term
slow. Like,
financial stability, where
speaking
even
at
though
Harvard, it's not necessarily like
we haven't really seen
a
big
financial
downside risks.
press conference, like,
At
our
the same
typical
time,
Jerome
the
Powell
last thing I'll
speech.
say is,
So
I remember,
it's not like gonna be
before I took over
insane.
this chair, thinking I'll almost certainly never have to do quantitative.
Like, we're back in profit now.
So what's that expression? Man plans and God laughs, something like that. So it just, the pandemic came around and we needed to do a lot of asset purchases in a big hurry, and we did. So far, no Treasury Department has ever said, stop doing that, you're supporting the economy too much. Maybe that'll happen someday, but it hasn't happened yet.
So let's talk about the dynamics of inflation since the spike in 2022. Inflation has been coming down since then, but it still hasn't reached its 2% target. Some have argued that that last mile is extremely difficult, and to obtain that, we will need a recession. Others have argued that you've gotten us very close and you'll get us the rest of the way. Are you concerned about the time duration of the path from the high inflation of 2022 back to target? It's taken time. We're not there yet. Is that a destination we'll reach, or are you concerned that the last mile will prove very difficult?
So we will reach, the FOMC is and will continue to be committed to getting inflation back to 2% on a sustained basis. That's the place to start. So
That was
I feel
good.
like we had pretty much gotten there at the end of 2024 against the predictions of almost the entire economics profession. When we raised rates a lot and very quickly in 2022, 100% essentially of economists were forecasting a recession. We didn't have one. Actually, we had 23 and 24 were both very strong years as the supply side healed and as our higher rates had some effect on inflation. So by 2024, you had the economy growing at 2.5%. You had inflation in the 2 plus a few tenths on a 12-month basis by the end of the year. And you had the employment market. You still had the labor market.
Bro, this shit moving mad slow. It's time to rip some Fournette.
Landing. We had it there. Then since then, we've had to face a much smaller source of inflation, which is the tariff inflation is visible, and we think it's really just a one-time price increase. That's been our thinking since the beginning. Right now, we think it's adding somewhere between a half and a full percentage point to inflation, but that's a much smaller thing than we saw during the pandemic inflation. And and of course now we're facing events in the Middle East, which will certainly affect gas prices, and we feel like our policy is in a good place for us to wait and see how that turns out.
Let me turn to the current crisis in the Middle East and the effect on energy prices. Indeed, this classroom is familiar with that question from the last problem set, where we asked, how would you advise the Fed to respond to the rising price of oil? And we teach that when there's a demand shock, it's a pretty natural set of recommendations that emerge for the Fed. But when there's a supply shock, like this energy price shock, there's trade-offs that the Fed has to juggle. How do you make those trade-offs in general, and how do you make those trade-offs in this particular instance? And can you help everyone with their piece?
Well, maybe they should tell me. Sure. So it's you start with what you said. Our tools work on demand. Higher rates will tend to moderate demand. Lower rates will tend to stimulate demand. And when you have a supply shock, our tool doesn't have meaningful shorter-term effects on supply. So when you have a supply shock, the first question is, do you respond to it? And the classic question has been around energy, just in general, not really speaking about the current situation, although I'll get to that, I guess. But, energy shocks have tended to come and go pretty quickly. Monetary policy works with long and variable lags, famously. And so by the time the effects of a tightening in monetary policy take effect, the oil price shock is probably long gone, and you're weighing on the economy at a time when it's not appropriate. So the tendency is to look through any kind of a supply shock, but a critical, essential aspect of that is you have to carefully monitor inflation expectations, because you can have a series of these supply shocks, and that can lead the public generally, businesses, price setters, households, lead them to start expecting.
I posted how many lots I'm in on aliahmed.trades.
Inflation is now
It's on my story.
just higher. That can happen. So you monitor that very, very carefully. Also, in the current situation, you have to be mindful of the whole broader context. Broader context is we're still, we've been coming down close to 2% post-pandemic. Stayed at 2%, so it's been a while, and we're very mindful of that. Inflation expectations do appear to be well anchored beyond the short term, but nonetheless, it's something as we will eventually maybe face the question of what to do here. We're not really facing it yet because we don't know what the economic effects will be, but we'll certainly be mindful of that broader context.
You've been a powerful and vigorous defender of the independence of the Fed with respect to monetary policy. You've also been collaborative with administrations with respect to financial regulation. So under President Biden, you collaborated in a program of increasing regulation. Under President Trump, you've worked together to reduce regulation. So on the one hand, we've got an independent Fed with respect to monetary policy, and on the other hand, we have a collaborative Fed with respect to financial regulation. I don't think there's a tension there, but can you explain to us those two different approaches and how you understand them?
Yes, so start with monetary policy. I think there's pretty broad consensus in both political parties on both sides of Capitol Hill, and our oversight.
This is gold, bro.
Not the administration.
That's what pair I'm in right now.
Pretty broad agreement that on monetary policy, the Fed needs to be fully politically independent, not reactive to political things at all. We just need to do our job and stick to our game. Regulation is a little bit different, especially since Dodd-Frank, where the Dodd-Frank Act created something called the Vice Chair for Supervision, who has a specific statutory assignment, which is to oversee all of supervision and also set the agenda for regulation. So the Vice Chair for Supervision, if she wants to propose a change in, for example, the Basel III Accord as implemented in the United States, she has to bring that to the Board of Governors, which is 7 governors, and vote for it. But she has full control over supervision. So as chair, the whole idea is to be non-political and not, never working for or against any political party or individual, or never even considering things like that. So I think the way the law works is the chair should allow the vice chair to carry out the role that Congress has assigned to that person by statute. And that's what that is. So you'll see, and the two parties really have a big difference on regulations now. So I like to think that the chair should always be someone who is working without regard to political and should be therefore a person who can be reappointed by either side. That's always been the case. Has been, Ben Bernanke was reappointed, I was reappointed.
Oh,
And I think
well,
it's
moving so
it's a good
slow,
test of
bro.
the Fed's nonpartisanship that your appeal is really bipartisan. I think that's a critical thing. So if I were to try to impose my personal views on regulation, that really wouldn't work. So I think there's I don't want to say deference, but any chair needs to let the vice chair for supervision take the lead on those issues, and then I'm another voter, is what I am.
So let's talk about Dodd-Frank and the reforms to the financial system. 2008 was a terrible crisis, and there were many efforts made in the years afterwards to tighten the bolts and
Yeah,
safer.
I'm taking this account to 1 million.
To these kinds of cataclysmic events. But today we look out of the world and we see lots of threats, both inside the formal banking system that you regulate and in the non-bank financial system, which is lightly or not at all regulated. So I wanted to have your thoughts on whether we're in a position of relative safety after all the Dodd-Frank and other reforms following the 2008 financial crisis, or whether the new threats actually have brought us to another period of concern. And just to illustrate with a couple examples, inside the banking system, there's commercial real estate that has...
I might scale in if we pull back up and get another confirmation
Non-financial, non-banking...
in like that point of interest.
We have the private credit market and a very active debate about its health. We have concerns about cybersecurity and the age of AI. Do you worry that another financial crisis looms
Where
out
is
there?
everyone?
Of course, there's always a possibility, but is it something that's a issue of high alert, or do you feel that we're putting all the pieces in the right places?
After the global financial crisis, we actually started a new division called the Division of Financial Stability, and their job is to be, sort of the watchers of all financial stability issues all the time. So we're not. The old system was the crisis arrives, we get the team together, and we battle the crisis. This is much more of an ongoing monitoring thing with a framework that can be checked. So I would say after the global financial crisis, which happened when you all were extremely young, between Dodd-Frank and Basel agreements, we pretty dramatically raised capital liquidity.
Oh, nice, a score.
That the largest firms and other banks have, and I think that's been a good thing. I think they're also much sort of more transparent and more aware of their risks and that kind of thing. So
Rebecca Black, that was
significantly hardened the system
super tough.
against things that happened in the global financial crisis.
Honestly, I just need something to pass the time while I fucking trade.
Is really around mortgages, and so that kind of a situation. We've got well-capitalized large banks, but that's just one part of the financial system. The capital markets. The U.S. has by far the largest capital sector relative to the banking sector. Other countries still have a much bigger banking sector relative to their capital markets, and that's going to be less well regulated, and that's a good thing. You want it to be the place where where biotech companies can do IPOs, and they may or may not succeed, but they can get capital out of that market. And you're taking a lot of risk, but great things happen because people put money in biotech. So we've done some hardening of that, but we shouldn't be trying to regulate risk out of existence. So I think we did fix some of the things that broke in the global financial crisis and the pandemic. We did address. The real thing, though, is the economy. The financial sector is just always evolving rapidly, and I think the vigilance is what you need. You just need to always know that there's another thing coming, I think in particular we've had all kinds of financial crises, but we've never really had a successful cyber attack on a large financial utility, let's say, or financial institution, and that would be quite a different thing. People are going to lose money in certain part of the economy. We have a hugely resilient economy. system now. It's more, let me say this, it's more about resilience than it is about avoiding crises. One of our former people used to say that we're in the levee building business, not the hurricane prevention business, right? So they're going to be hurricanes, and they're going to come and
We're in gold.
you won't know what the nature will be. So you want a highly resilient financial system, and we do have that. But again, nobody who's in that business will ever give you a green light. They'll always say, here, these are the risks, and we got to monitor. You mentioned private credit. So private credit is something you guys are probably following. It's a relatively small part of a very large asset pool. We're watching it super carefully, as everyone is. We're talking to the people in the
Yeah, bro, I really want bald.
investors and everything. I think we understand it. We're monitoring it. We're looking for things that might lead to greater contagion or greater losses or connections to the banking system.
Motherfucker stole my kill.
You know, we're going to do that. You're not going to hear people say, "Oh, there's no problem here," because that's a jinx. But nonetheless, it's something that we're following very carefully.
What is one of your biggest regrets in your time as Fed chair? And on the other hand, what is something that you're very proud of?
You know, on regrets, I don't allow myself the luxury of that. I just really important that in my job, I'm focused on the windshield and not the mirror. And so I don't. I'm tempted to say regrets. I've had a few, but then again, not so many, or whatever the line is from that Frank Sinatra song. So I just think I'll have plenty of time.
All right, gold.
After I'm out of this role, but honestly, you just have to keep looking at the next thing. You can't be berating yourself for the mistakes that you make. You're going to make mistakes, and you're going to learn from them. Take it from an expert. I've made plenty, but I don't focus on regrets and things like that. You know, overall, in terms of what I'm proud of, I'm more than happy to talk about that.
Let's go for it.
Yeah, let's go deep there.
About to get fucked.
I'll just say it's an incredible
Ah, I knew it.
service, as many of you will find out at some point in your life. I always wanted to do some of it. I saw these people around Washington who were well-known public servants like George Shultz. I would think that looks like a really interesting thing to do. It's different, you know, in the private sector. I love my private sector.
Let's see, what pair are you trading?
Private sector,
I'm
but
in gold
it
right
really is
now.
The feeling of what you're doing is ideally helping all Americans and that kind of thing. It's a great honor to serve the public, and particularly in a job like this. So that is the main thing I'm proud of is, you know, 14 years at the Fed and 8.5 of them as chair. I'll always be proud of that.
And I'm very grateful to you for your service to our country. So if you were willing to share publicly some advice that you would give to the next Fed chair, we'd love to hear it.
So one thing you will learn when your children are grown up and they have their own children is never volunteer advice. Only give advice when asked. So, and I would only give advice if asked, and I would do it privately. But I'll just say in general, a couple.
Yeah, my entry is basically built off of this, right?
Very, very important.
We swept yesterday's previous day high, and then if you go down a lower time frame, you can see this level that pushed markets down,
There's always a temptation
and
to wanna
price rejected off of
move
it, gave me
into
an
other
evening
areas.
star
So
pattern. I really
I
like
think
this.
we have
Bullish
a
candle,
really
indecisive
powerful
candle, very
tool.
strong
They're supposed
bearish.
to be for maximum
I'm going to be
price
monitoring it for
financial
a potential
stability.
scale in.
There's always a time when an administration looks and says, it would be good to use that tool for something else. What if we were just to and call that that's part of it. Happens all the time, and we just have to be in a situation where we're not trying to work against any politician or any administration, but we have to be careful to stick to it. The other thing is, I'll just note that, you know, the Fed's not a perfect institution. Don't look for perfection. What we do is very challenging and highly uncertain, but it's a great American institution.
No, if it doesn't have to make a new lower low. I'd be looking for something to indicate it would be a potential lower high, and getting it off of that.
It's very hard to build great democratic institutions. To bring them down.
So you were uncomfortable giving unsolicited advice to your successor. I know that the students in this room would love to hear your advice. They've asked me for my advice and asked me what you would advise them. So they're entering into an uncertain time, an economy where new job formation is lower for many reasons. In particular, jobs that were plentiful a couple of years ago for students out of college are no longer so. AI sits
Oh, fuck. God damn it.
transformation that is both promising and existentially threatening. So if you're advising the 600 students that sit here today, what would you suggest they think about as they embark on both academic and then ultimately professional careers?
Let me start by saying that I'm well aware, and my colleagues too are well aware of the current situation for students coming out. It's a time of very low job creation. And also you have AI going on. You've got the effects on job creation of significant changes in immigration policy, which have brought down both demand and supply of workers. The unemployment rate is really low, but that doesn't help you if you're coming into that kind of market. So it's a time when there's a business cycle, right? And you're coming out in the business cycle at a time when getting hired is a little bit challenging. There's also probably something more longer term, more secular that's happening and around technology and AI. So yes, it is a challenging time, but I'll say a couple things. One just is that the U.S. economy, compared to other major open economies and big market-based economies around the world, is just incredibly dynamic and productive. Since World War II, U.S., compared to other, again, large, mature economies, our productivity has grown at like twice the speed, for example, in Europe.
Scaling in literally just means like adding another position. Like, so if we get a good rejection out of here, I would just take another position.
It's an incredibly flexible and dynamic economy. It reinvents itself. Technology is always.
But like, I need that rejection first. You know what I mean?
So just be optimistic.
I need like some sort of confirmation.
I'm very optimistic about the medium and long term. And the other thing is, my observation is that these large language models make people much more productive. I feel like it's making me more productive because I can learn things really quickly. And I talk to my son and others who are out there in the world, and I think if you use it well, it's making you more productive. So I think you're in a situation where you need to invest the time to really master the use of these new technologies, and that should stand you in good stead. But there's no denying it's a challenging time to enter the labor market, but it may take some patience and all that. But in the longer term, this economy is going to give you great opportunities. Just be a little optimistic.
When you talk about the longer term, are you talking about 10 years, 20 years, 40 years? Are you worried that there'll be wind at our back as we use these tools over the next decade, but at some horizon, let's say 40 years, there'll be substitution rather than complementarity?
It's so hard to say. I mean, a lot of people, you talk to business people, are
I mean, bro, we will see. Like,
sort of the next
anybody who wants to say buys, you guys could be right at the end of the day. Like, I just simply
come in, but then
don't care. Like, I'm gonna trade what I see, and if I'm wrong, I'll learn off of it. And if I'm right, then you guys should learn off of it.
things like that. I don't think it shouldn't have those kinds of effects on people who use AI well. I don't know, but so certainly the next few years look like whatever the effects are, they'll start to feel them, because major U.S. companies, we talk to a lot of those people who run those companies, they're all looking at what they can do, and the truth is they can take out a lot of jobs that can be automated by those large language models. They just can't. Because their competitors are doing it. Higher costs than their competitors. What's that going to mean for you? It may not mean that much. It depends on what you're going to wind up doing. You may stay in school a little bit, and you may do something that is. It's going to create new jobs too over time. And again, it makes people more productive. I did talk to a CEO in tech world who said the marginal benefit of a new employee in this world is actually very high. Now, that's not what you hear all the time. So I don't know. I mean, when if you look back through this, been going on for a couple hundred years. Since the loom was invented, right, and put all the people who were doing weaving out of business. But so, in all cases, it has wound up raising productivity and raising living standards. As long as the society is producing people who can that the state produce the benefit from that technology. So that will be the case here. But you're right. There can be a period during which it's challenging, and this may be one of those. But nonetheless, I would just say it's out there.
Oh, fuck.
It's out there to be done. I would be.
Fuck, I'm so weak.
Economy compared to any other economy.
Thank you so much. We're now going to open it up to your questions. So I think I've got Jason and David in the
What a bot.
in the well, and I've got 2 microphones in the balcony. Why don't we start with Jason? Do you have a question?
I think I have a question.
Okay,
if that's
great,
okay.
fantastic. We're gonna let
Come
Jason ask
on.
the first question.
So, Chair Powell, when you're making decisions at the Fed, I'm curious, how much are you relying on very specific economic models? The Fed has its own big fancy model, FERBIS. How much are you relying on information you get from talking to people out in the real world, to businesses, your own intuition and experience? What do you bring together as a way of thinking about these decisions?
Kind of like
With
this
economics,
rejection.
but everything else that feeds into it.
So it's really all of these. But you have to start with the perimeter. The reserve banks are in touch. They're in
Before trading, I was doing video editing, bro.
12 reserve banks, and they bring summaries of these extensive conversations they have with the public sector, the private sector, universities, healthcare, everything in their district. And we see all of that in the beige book and in the meetings. We get all of that. We also look at several models. It's never just the FERBIS model. It's many, many different models, and we look at different alternative simulations. You look at all of that, and then we look at where our policy stance is, and we look out the window and we say, does it look like our policy stance is affecting the economy in a way that moves us closer to our goal variables or keeps us at our goal variables? You do all of that. We also talk to each other. I talk to the other 18 participants on the FOMC a couple of times each cycle, and people have different thoughts and ways of thinking about things. Talk to the senior staff. They've been doing this longer than any of us. So all of those things go into it. I wouldn't say, so a good analogy is when I was in the private equity business, we had really good models of companies. And my big boss said, we want to have the best model in the industry, but if you think that model is going to make the decision for you, you're in the wrong business. So the models are just illustrative. We cannot model the U.S. economy with the kind of precision that we will never be able to. It's like modeling the weather. You can't predict it 2 months away. So it's all of those things, Jason.
Thank you.
Okay, so David, why don't you pick the first hand, and then Jason, you'll get the second hand. And then we'll go to the balcony, so looking for someone upstairs.
Hi, my name is Fabio. I'm a first year studying economics and government. I'm really interested in kind of decision making in the Fed. How do you work with situations where like the decision might be very tight and like sometimes there's like expectations of like the interest rates increasing, or it might be very tight in those very tight decisions. Like how do you end up making the decision?
So remember, I'm one of 12 voters. There's an FOMC cycle is about 7 weeks between meetings. We have 8 of them a year. So, and I would say sort of 3 weeks before the meeting, by then I have to have a pretty good sense of what I think we need to do. And staff will already have been working on, if we're doing anything in particular, we always have like a special topic. So a lot of work is going on. So I almost need to make a decision about the probable thing we're going to do. And then I have to talk to everybody a couple of times because I got to get people to vote for this. And I've got
Somebody said, makes sense why you're good at editing videos, but when you did it, was it for business, for influencers? No, I was editing my own, like I was editing soccer videos, and then I was doing it for like a lot of I won't even lie, like for trappers, bro. People needed like promotional videos, I'd make them for them.
Listening to people. Listening is, if you listen to people and you hear them and you can make their argument and and they understand that you're actually listening to them and not just, communicating at them. For most of the people, most of the time, that's going to be enough. And by the way, that's true on Capitol Hill. That's true. It was true when I was a governor. I always felt like Ben Bernanke and Matt were listening to me, and if they could engage with points I was making, then I felt like I could support what they wanted to support. So it's a lot of that, though. I mean, it's a lot of committee management. That's the big part of it is to have active dialogues going with all of the FOMC participants, and by the way, also with all the senior staff who've been doing this a very long time, and they bring, in many cases, they bring, history going back many years. For example, in the public communications that we make, somebody who's been doing that for 30 years will tell you don't use that word, even though that word might make sense in another context.
Here.
Yeah, bro. They used to like have like Telegram promo videos. Because they would have like Telegram like group chats and shit. So I would just get paid, bro.
So I wanted to
do that.
To what extent could stress in these private credit markets spill over into the traditional banking system?
Nah, bro.
That's
I
the
honestly
question
have
we
not
ask
used any.
ourselves quite
I
a
have
bit.
people who edit my stuff now.
As I mentioned, we're watching very carefully. Of course, you read what you can read in public. We're also getting.
We use AI for like
backstory
thumbnails,
from
yeah.
People who run these.
That's about it, though.
organizations, and from all the banks, the supervisors are well aware of what the bank's exposure is and what is not. And I'm reluctant to say anything that suggests that we're dismissive of the risk, but we're looking for connections to the banking system and things that might, result in contagion. We don't see those right now. What we see is, a correction going on, and certainly there'll be people losing money and things like that. But it doesn't seem to have the makings of a broader systemic event. But again, we never give a clean bill of health. We just keep watching for that. We don't see those characteristics right now.
Go to the balcony and remember to share your name when you begin your question. Great.
Hi, my name is Cody. Thank you so much for being here, Mr. Powell. My question is about whether international relations has impact on your decision making. I know you mentioned that the Fed's job is to do exactly what's best objectively for the American economy, but I'm wondering, if you're competing with, let's say China or other powerful countries, whether or not you would kind of, cut interest rates or do something like that to the local economy.
No, it doesn't. We're always asking the question, as you suggest. What we serve the American public always in all of our decisions, and what is best for them. How do we achieve maximum employment and price stability on a sustainable basis? That's what we're always asking. We do, meet with Basel. The central banks all meet without the finance ministries, and we can talk privately about what's going on.
I like this
Financial
drop.
markets. It is a global economy. We all know each other, and frankly, many of us have regular communications going on just privately, or by telephone, email, and text, and things like that. But we're never looking to get on the turf of the national security people or the State Department or things like that. We're not looking at things that way. We're looking at our goals. That would be, I think, a classic case of mission creep. If we were to say, hey, let's deviate from just chasing these two goals and let's do something for a third purpose. That would almost by definition make us less effective at the things we're supposed to be doing. So we try to stick to that.
I really like this drop.
Good morning. My name is Jenny. Thank you so much for coming. We're all very honored that you took the time to come. So last lecture we learned about soft landings and about how
Who's that guy who was
it's
shooting at
much
me?
more ideal in hard
Oh, I
landings,
should have
and
taken the
in
high ground.
history We've had far more hard landings than soft landings. And you were just talking about how it's really important that you are monitoring expected inflation. And I think a lot of that just comes down to the trust between the public and the central bank. And the central bank is known to be much more technocratic, but I think especially with like the rise of populism and previous events, there seems to be a lot of impact of like political tensions between or cooperation between the Fed chair position and the administration.
Sold myself, huh?
And I wanted to ask you, how do you still keep the public's trust this way?
By sticking to our jobs and doing them well. Ultimately, if we deliver the maximum employment and price stability, or at least are seen to be everything we possibly can as we meet various shocks and multiple supply shocks in recent years, the public,
Fuck, man.
look at things like longer-term inflation expectations, and you'll see that they've remained pretty well.
No, I don't have a VA at all. I have
So
like a
if you
full-time
really
editing
think
team.
inflation's going to be higher, you can make some money betting against that, but people don't do that. The people who are putting their money to work in the financial
You guys hear that?
Not to give too much credit to that, but that's it. If we stick to our knitting and we do our jobs, we stay out of politics, stay out of the hot political issues of the day, and just do your job and keep your head down. I think, I see this through my dealings with elected people. If they get the sense that you're not there to deliver talking points, you're there to listen to them, and you're really somebody who's committed to doing your job and sticking just to that job, and that's all you want, and you're not going to get into politics, that's what we need to do. And I think generally,
Anyone who's looking for a 250% deposit bonus, make sure you message my Telegram,
I think generally around the country as well.
and I'll get you set up for that.
Remember to spell out your name.
Thank you, Chair Powell, for being here. My name is Jake.
Ooh,
as
look at
my
that drop.
term ends in May, and a potential successor, Kevin Warsh, has indicated a desire to cut rates if he fills the role of chair. What is your take on the effect that a cut would have on the flexibility of the Fed to remain well positioned and maintain both sides of its dual mandate, particularly given the fact that inflation has remained elevated above the Fed's 2% target for several years now, and progress is further halted by the oil shock and tariffs especially?
Jake, that's not something I'm gonna swing at, that pitch. Is that a Red Sox jersey, by the way?
I called on him.
Yeah. Okay. I know this must be Red Sox country.
So we're going to go to the balcony next.
Hi,
Powell just kind of got bitched, huh?
So, earlier you said that you don't know how much you believe in something until someone tries to take it apart. So my question was, what's the thing you currently believe about the economy that you're least confident in?
Interesting question.
I'm trying to catch him stumbling.
I'm not going to give you a particular individual thing at the moment, but I will say that I would say that, of course, this is self-serving.
Damn, we both got a blue SMG. That's kind of
Having
crazy.
worked in the private economy for most of my career, I don't have any disposition to believe that models can really capture it, because so much of it is animal spirits.
Fuck, I need meds.
And also it's
Oh, I
just,
just...
again,
Oh my
I go
god,
back
what
to
am I
the
doing?
weather. Will we ever be able to predict the weather with any precision 3 months ahead, other than that seasons? So the economy, no one has been able to really successfully predict the economy. So I think the temptation is always to place too much sort of stock in in models or in one particular. The other thing is, which is a big takeaway, is about fat tails, right? So famously, there's a normal distribution, and the tails are what they are. It's not a normal distribution. The tails are fat, and however fat you think they are, they're fatter than that. The possibility for the economies at any given time is so much broader. For example, the pandemic inflation. We'd spent 15 years with the inflation below target, and that was at a time of QE and lots of fiscal stimulus and that kind of thing. We had inflation below target, and people, pretty much the profession, had the big problem the whole profession was trying to solve was how do we get inflation up to 2%? That was really the problem. And then along comes the pandemic inflation, and bang, suddenly you have a 40-year high inflation. So it's hard to keep your mind open to just how broad the possibilities are.
Hey, down here, yes.
Hi, my name is Robert. Thank you so much for being here. I'm a first year studying econ, math, and philosophy.
So many economists that I've listened to, at least retroactively, say that what we really needed during the COVID pandemic was around $3 trillion, and the government printed something along $6 trillion more than that, and so inflation rose, but that money is still out there. So if rates come down, obviously you took initiative and raised rates significantly. If rates get lowered again to, let's say, 2 or so percent, do you think that the price of rates now, do you think that all that extra money being out there will, on top of that's going to push us back into an inflationary spiral? And then also I was wondering, for your next press conference, are you going to start it with good afternoon or hello everyone?
That's a great, he's trying to bet on Polymarket or on Kalshi, whatever it is.
So, sorry, the first question was
the expansion of the money supply.
Yeah, no, so I think monetary quantities are a very challenging way to try to think about inflation.
This guy's a way better fucking
time
move
when
than me.
the profession thought that, monetary quantities and inflation were tightly linked, and of course, in an abstract way or in a simple model, it makes sense.
No shot, I lose
You
this.
don't increase the amount of goods and you double the amount of money, then the price has to go up. But there has been relatively little correlation, and my story of pandemic inflation would not be about monetary quantities mainly. I'm not.
Come on, baby.
It was more
Scaling and
you did
profit,
have a lot of
fucking.
stimulus, particularly in the United States. At the same time, we were looking at the possibility of another Great Depression. We didn't know whether there would ever be a vaccine. Millions of people.
This guy fucking sucks.
So literally, for the first time probably ever, we're looking at little alternative simulations that are a Great Depression estimate. So we did a lot of stimulus. And then when the global economy reopened after shutting down, you had this burst of demand, red hot demand, and constrained supply still. So automobiles is a great example. Everybody wanted a car because they didn't want to take public transportation. They'd all moved to the suburbs and out of the city. So I need a car. And yet you couldn't make cars because you couldn't get the semiconductors. So you're looking at a vertical supply curve. So a little bit of demand drove prices up a lot.
Instead of, I think that pullback is a higher low on the minute 15. Yeah, that's what I was like anticipating when I went down to the minute 5. Caught a nice like little scaling right there, shorter my stops.
Down, and also it won't be vertical forever. It'll start. You'll get supply side healing. You got those two things. It was always both supply and demand for me, and you got inflation coming down very sharply in 23 and 24. We got close to the end of your question. We got pretty close to 2% in by the end of 24. Now we were just dealing with the effect of tariffs, which have largely fallen in the U.S. They've been less than expected because the other side other cities retaliated also because what was implemented was less than what had been announced. Nonetheless, that was the piece. We were at about 3%
No.
inflation and somewhere tariffs. So we've been pretty close to 2% all this time. Now we have another supply shock coming. It's one of those times where you get a series of supply shocks. First the pandemic and a much smaller one called tariffs. And we're getting now an energy shock. No one knows how big it will be. It's way too early to know. As I mentioned, we do think our policies are in place for us to do this.
One last question.
I fucked myself with that fall damage.
Lola, and I was wondering at what point does the size of the US's debt break the point of natural systems repayment, and if that's something you're worried about now, or something you think our generation should look for?
I don't think we know what that number is, sort of ratio of debt to GDP. Where the problem there are, of course.
While it's going up, silver and gold have started to go down.
Much higher.
Nice. Do I live in Miami? No, I do not.
Of sovereign debt to their GDP than we do. What's clear is that our debt is growing much faster. The federal government debt is growing substantially faster than our economy, and that ratio is going up. And in the long run, that's kind of the definition of unsustainable. The level of the debt is not unsustainable, but the path is not sustainable. And so it's really important that we get back to pay the debt down, just to have primary balance and begin to have the economy actually growing more quickly than it will not end well if we don't do something fairly soon. This is not the Fed's job, of course, and I pretty much limit myself to those high-level points, which essentially.
I've never lived in the UK.
So we're gonna thank Chair Powell, but let me
I don't know where
just
that came from, but I have
describe
never
the
lived in the
events that
UK.
now follows. So first we'll thank Chair Powell. Then anyone who wants to is welcome to join us on the stage, and we'll take a group photo with Chair Powell. Because of a tight schedule, there can't be any selfies, because if there's one selfie, there's 600 selfies.
Right.
So you'll need to make do with one photograph of the entire class with our esteemed guest. But before we do that, please join me in warmly thanking Chair Powell.
So he's done. Jerome Powell's done. This shit was whack.
Come up on stage.
Oh, that was it. That was fucking whack. Holy Bloom, what the fuck? Bro. What the fuck was that? Man, this shit is moving so slow. What the fuck is this guy saying? Alright guys, Jerome Powell just Alright guys, Jerome Powell just finished speaking. I'm gonna be ending the stream here. I'm gonna be moving on with the day, and I'll keep you guys updated. Yeah, I've been trading 5 years now, bro. But yeah, I'm gonna end the stream right here. Make sure you guys subscribe. Make sure you guys, if you have not seen the last episode, you go watch that right now. Drop a comment, say that you're from the live stream, and you'll have a chance at potentially winning $100. I will see you guys in the next one, and yeah.